I never thought someone I considered my closest friend would humiliate me in front of everyone at my own engagement party. But when she openly mocked my ring, something in me snapped, and by the end of it, she wasn't just off the guest list, but out of my life entirely. It all began at the engagement party Ethan and I had been dreaming of for months. We wanted something intimate, a night filled with warmth and laughter, surrounded by the people we loved most. The little cafe we chose was perfect. Dim lighting, soft acoustic music, and tables adorned with twinkling fairy lights. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for us. My cheeks hurt from smiling as I floated from one group to another, soaking in the joy. The centerpiece of the night, at least for me, was my engagement ring. Ethan had proposed with a delicate vintage piece that had belonged to his grandmother. It wasn't the kind of ring that screamed for attention. It was subtle, with a small but radiant diamond set in an intricate gold band. It was exactly my style, and knowing it carried so much history made it irreplaceable to me. As I walked around, people complimented it, some even tearing up when they heard the story behind it. Then Sophie arrived. She breezed in late, as she often did, her energy commanding attention. Sophie had been my best friend since college. She was confident, bold, and the life of every party. When she hugged me, her perfume enveloped me, and she squealed, "Congrats, babe. You're finally off the market." But her smile faltered as soon as she caught sight of my hand. She grabbed it, holding it up like she was examining a relic in a museum. "Oh," she said, drawing the word out longer than necessary. "That's cute. I didn't know minimalism was your thing." Her voice carried through the cafe, and a few people turned to look. I felt my stomach drop, heat rising to my cheeks. I forced a laugh, but it came out shaky. "It's vintage," I explained, trying to match her light tone. "It was Ethan's grandma's." "Oh, well, that's sweet," she replied, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Small rings are super trendy right now. You're so lucky you don't care about that flashy stuff." She turned to Ethan, who had walked over to join us, and said with a playful nudge, "Guess this didn't set you back too much, huh?" Ethan's face darkened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he put an arm around me and kissed the top of my head. "It's perfect," he said firmly. I wish that was the end of it, but Sophie seemed to have made my ring the running joke of the night. At one point, when I was chatting with some mutual friends, she chimed in out of nowhere, "You know what I love about a small ring? You can wear it without worrying someone's going to mug you for it." Everyone laughed nervously. I felt like shrinking into myself. I spent the rest of the evening trying to avoid her, which wasn't easy since she kept inserting herself into conversations. My mom must have noticed something was wrong because, at one point, she pulled me aside and whispered, "Don't let anyone ruin this night for you, sweetheart. You and Ethan are what matter." But the damage was done. Later that night, when the cafe was quiet and Ethan and I were alone at home, I stared at the ring on my finger, turning it over under the soft glow of our living room lamp. I loved it. I loved what it symbolized. But Sophie's words played on repeat in my head. "Do you think it's too small?" I asked Ethan softly. He frowned, sitting down beside me. "Are you serious?" "It's perfect." "You're perfect." I nodded, but the insecurity Sophie had planted wouldn't budge. "I just don't understand why she kept making comments like that. She knows how much this means to me." Ethan sighed, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "She probably thought she was being funny. Sophie doesn't always think before she speaks." Maybe he was right, but something about the way she said it, the tone, the sly smile, didn't sit right with me. Sophie wasn't just being thoughtless. It felt calculated, like she wanted me to feel small too. As I crawled into bed that night, I told myself I was overthinking. Sophie had been my best friend for years. She wasn't perfect, sure, but she'd always been there for me. I decided to let it go. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a joke or a misunderstanding. It felt like the start of something bigger, something that would change everything. The morning after the engagement party, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. Sophie's comments were on a loop in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I tried to remind myself of all the good times we'd had over the years, the late-night talks in college, the vacations we'd planned together, the way she always made me laugh when I was down. But no matter how hard I tried, the image of her smug expression as she joked about my ring in front of everyone refused to leave. Ethan noticed my mood right away. "You're still thinking about Sophie, aren't you?" he asked, handing me a cup of coffee as I sat at the kitchen table. "I just don't get it," I admitted, staring down at the steam rising from the mug. Why would she say those things? It wasn't just one comment, It was the whole night. And she knows how much this ring means to me. Ethan sighed, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me. You know how Sophie is. She probably didn't even realize how hurtful she was being. I nodded, though his words didn't bring much comfort. If she didn't realize, then I needed to tell her. I couldn't let this fester, not when she was supposed to be one of my closest friends. So I called her. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. Hey, bride-to-be. What's up? I didn't want to beat around the bush, so I dove straight in. Sophie, I need to talk to you about last night. There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. What about it? The comments you made about my ring, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. They really hurt me. I don't know if you meant to, but you embarrassed me in front of everyone. She laughed again, louder this time, as if I'd just told the funniest joke. Oh, come on. You're seriously upset about that? I was just teasing. You know me, I don't have a filter sometimes. It didn't feel like teasing, I replied firmly. You said those things in front of all our friends and family. It felt mean, Sophie. Well, it's not like I lied, is it? She said, her tone suddenly defensive. It is a small ring. But hey, it suits you. You're not exactly the type to wear something flashy. Anyway, my stomach turned. Her words dripped with condescension, and I could almost picture the smirk on her face as she said them. It's not about the size, I shot back, my voice trembling with frustration. It's about how you made me feel. That ring is special to me, and you mocked it like it was some cheap piece of jewelry. Oh, please, she scoffed. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not my fault Ethan couldn't afford something nicer. You deserve better, babe. It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously insulting my fiancé now? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. I'm not insulting him, she said, her tone sugary sweet. I'm just saying you could have done better. You're my best friend. I want you to have the best. That's not for you to decide, I snapped, unable to hold back anymore. Ethan is everything I could have ever wanted, and I love him. If you can't be happy for me, then maybe we need to take a break. Sophie let out an exaggerated sigh.
Fine.
If you're gonna be this sensitive, I won't say anything else. Happy now. I hung up without saying another word. My hands were trembling as I set the phone down, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring at it. Was this really happening? For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Sophie's words had cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just the comments about the ring or Ethan, it was the complete lack of remorse. She didn't even try to apologize or understand where I was coming from. Instead, she doubled down, twisting the knife with every word. I spent hours going over every interaction we'd had in the past, searching for signs I might have missed. Sophie had always been blunt, sure, but this felt different. There was a cruelty to her words that I couldn't ignore. Was I just now seeing a side of her I'd been blind to all these years? That evening, I confided in Ethan again. Am I overreacting? I asked, sitting beside him on the couch. No, he said without hesitation. She crossed a line, and you had every right to call her out. But what if she didn't mean it that way? What if I'm reading too much into it? Ethan shook his head. Even if she didn't mean it, a real friend would have apologized when you told them they hurt you. Instead, she made it worse. That's not okay. He was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Sophie had been such a big part of my life for so long. The thought of losing her felt like losing a part of myself. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. This wasn't just a one-time thing. There was something deeper going on, something that made her think it was okay to tear me down on what should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt for now. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe there was something going on in her life that I didn't know about. But as much as I wanted to believe that, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. And unfortunately, I was right. A few days after my tense conversation with Sophie, I was starting to think things might settle down. She hadn't reached out again, which honestly was a relief. I tried to refocus my energy on wedding planning, but her comments still echoed in my mind. Every time I looked at my ring, I felt a twinge of insecurity, which made me angry because I loved that ring. I loved what it stood for. Then the group chat incident happened. It was late in the evening when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a notification from our mutual friend group's chat. It was a lively group, 8 of us who'd grown close over the years, sharing memes, making plans, and hyping each other up through life's ups and downs. At least, that's how it used to feel. Someone had posted a meme. a picture of a tiny engagement ring captioned, "When he loves you, but his wallet doesn't." A few people reacted with laughing emojis, but my stomach dropped when I saw Sophie's comment beneath it. She'd added her own laughing emoji and wrote, "Reminds me of someone we know." I froze, rereading it to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a punch to the gut. Was she seriously dragging me in front of all our friends now? It wasn't even subtle. For a moment, I debated letting it go. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she didn't mean me. But no one else in the group was recently engaged, and that smug little emoji was unmistakably Sophie. My hands trembled as I typed my reply. "If you have something to say, Sophie, just say it to my face." The chat went dead. A minute passed. Then 2. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the typing indicator pop up and disappear, like someone was hesitating. Finally, Sophie responded. "Oh, relax. You know I'm just joking. Don't be so uptight." Her words felt like a slap. I could almost hear her voice in my head, that flippant tone she used whenever she wanted to brush something off. It was infuriating. Did she really think this was okay? I waited, hoping someone else in the group would say something. I wasn't expecting them to pick a side, but at the very least, I thought someone might call her out or acknowledge how hurtful her comment was. But no one did. They just stayed silent. I realized then how alone I felt in that moment. This group had been such a huge part of my life for years, and now it felt like they were standing on the sidelines, watching me get picked apart by someone who was supposed to be my best friend. I didn't reply again. Instead, I left the chat entirely. When I told Ethan about what had happened, his face hardened. "I can't believe she did that," he said, pacing the living room. "Actually, no, I can believe it. She's been acting like this for weeks." I sank into the couch, tears streaming down my face. "It's not just her," I said, my voice cracking. "It's everyone else too. Nobody stood up for me. Nobody even asked if I was okay." "Maybe they're afraid to get involved," Ethan said, sitting down beside me. "But that doesn't excuse Sophie. What kind of friend does that? Honestly, I think you need to cut her off. She doesn't deserve to be in your life, let alone at our wedding." His words hit me hard. Part of me wanted to defend Sophie, to insist that this was all just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't just one bad moment. It was a pattern. From the engagement party to the phone call. And now this, Sophie had made it clear how little she respected me, or my relationship. Still, the idea of uninviting her from the wedding felt drastic. She'd been such a big part of my life for so long. Could I really walk away from her just like that? Over the next few days, I noticed how quiet things had gotten. Without the group chat buzzing on my phone, I realized how much time I'd spent relying on it for connection. Now, every time I thought about messaging someone, I hesitated. Would they side with Sophie? Did they even care about what had happened? To my surprise, one of the girls from the chat, Lily, reached out privately. "Hey," she wrote. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened in the group chat." Sophie's comment was out of line. Her message was a small comfort, but it also made me realize how little support I'd gotten from the rest of the group. If they thought Sophie was out of line, why hadn't they said anything? Did they think staying silent was better than speaking up? I thanked Lily for her message, but I didn't feel any better. The damage was already done. Later that week, Ethan brought up the wedding again. "You don't have to decide now," he said, "but you should really think about whether Sophie deserves to be part of it. She's made it clear how she feels, and I don't want her ruining your big day." I nodded, though the thought of confronting her again made my stomach churn. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about our entire friendship. Sophie had been one of the most important people in my life for years, but now I was starting to wonder if I'd been blind to who she really was all along. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ring Ethan had given me, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happened, I wouldn't let Sophie or anyone else make me feel small again. The weeks following the group chat incident were a roller coaster of emotions. Sophie's words and the way she had humiliated me still hung over me like a dark cloud, and no amount of reassurance from Ethan or my other friends seemed to completely shake it. Every time I looked at my engagement ring, a piece of jewelry I had loved so deeply just weeks earlier, I felt a mixture of pride and doubt. It wasn't the ring itself that bothered me. It was how Sophie had twisted something so meaningful into a symbol of shame. One evening, as Ethan and I were sitting on the couch watching TV, he paused the show we were watching and turned to me. "I've been thinking," he started, his tone unusually serious. "What's on your mind?" I asked, sitting up. He reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over the ring. "You know how much I love this ring, right? And how much it means to my family." "Of course," I said, already sensing where this was going. "And I love it too. Don't even think about saying anything different." He smiled but didn't drop the subject. "I know you do. But I've also seen how much Sophie's comments have hurt you. And well, I've been saving up for a while now because I wanted to do something special for you. I thought, maybe we could upgrade your ring. Not because of her, but because I want you to feel like it's as perfect as you are." His words took me completely by surprise. "Ethan, you don't have to do that. I love this ring, just the way it is." "I know," he said, squeezing my hand. "But I've been thinking about it for a while. Even before all this drama with Sophie. I just want to give you something that feels magical. Something that's all ours." I hesitated for a moment, torn between my love for the original ring and the sheer thoughtfulness of his gesture. In the end, it wasn't about Sophie or her opinions. It was about Ethan and me and the love we shared. "Okay," I said finally, a smile breaking across my face. "Let's do it." The next weekend, we went to a jeweler Ethan had researched extensively. The moment we stepped inside, I felt a rush of excitement. Cases filled with sparkling diamonds and intricate designs surrounded us, and the possibilities felt endless. We worked with a designer who helped us create a ring that was still vintage-inspired, but with a few modern touches. The diamond was slightly larger than the original, and the band was adorned with tiny, intricate filigree that made it look like something out of a fairy tale. When I slipped it onto my finger, it felt like it had been made just for me. "I love it," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "It's perfect." Ethan grinned, clearly pleased with my reaction. "You deserve nothing less." It wasn't about proving anything to Sophie or anyone else. This ring was a celebration of our love and the life we were building together. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. When I posted a picture of the new ring on social media, the response was overwhelming. Friends and family flooded the comments with messages of congratulations and admiration. "Absolutely stunning," one person wrote. "Ethan really outdid himself," said another. But there was one person whose absence in the comments stood out like a glaring omission: Sophie. At first, I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she was busy or hadn't seen the post yet. But deep down, I knew better. Sophie never missed an opportunity to insert herself into conversations or make her presence known, especially on social media. Her silence was deliberate. I told myself it didn't matter. Her approval, or lack thereof, didn't define my happiness. But then I got a message from Lily, the same friend who had reached out after the group chat drama. "Hey," Lily wrote. "Just thought you should know. Sophie's been talking about you again." My heart sank. "What is she saying now?" "She's telling people that you're materialistic for upgrading your ring," Lily explained. "She said you're trying too hard to impress everyone and that it's, like, desperate or something." I stared at the screen, disbelief and anger bubbling inside me. Sophie didn't just stop at mocking my original ring. Now she was turning my upgrade into another punchline? That evening, as Ethan and I sat down for dinner, I couldn't keep it in any longer. "Sophie's at it again," I said, pushing my plate aside. "What now?" Ethan asked, his tone exasperated. I told him about Lily's message, my voice trembling with frustration. "She's calling me materialistic. Can you believe that? After everything she said and done, now she's acting like I'm the bad guy for upgrading the ring." Ethan's jaw tightened, and I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "That's it," he said firmly. "She's not coming to the wedding. I don't care if she's your oldest friend. She's toxic, and you don't need that kind of negativity in your life." I knew he was right, but the thought of cutting Sophie out completely still felt daunting. "What if I'm overreacting?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're not," Ethan said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "She's shown you who she really is. It's up to you whether you want to keep ignoring it or finally do something about it." That night, as I lay in bed staring at my new ring, I thought about all the times Sophie had crossed the line. From her comments at the engagement party to the group chat drama, and now this latest betrayal, it was clear that our friendship wasn't what I thought it was. I wanted to believe there was still a way to salvage things, but deep down I knew the truth. Sophie wasn't happy for me. She couldn't stand to see me happy, period. For the first time, I started to seriously consider what life might look like without her in it. And the more I thought about it, the lighter I felt. Maybe it was time to let go of the past and focus on the people who truly cared about me. Because at the end of the day, no ring, no matter how big or small, could ever be as valuable as the love and support of the people who really mattered. It started with another whispered revelation from Lily. By this point, I'd stopped looking at Sophie's social media or keeping tabs on what she was doing. But that didn't mean Sophie was done with me. Lily texted me one afternoon, "Hey, I hate to bring this up, but Sophie's been talking about you again. I thought you should know." My heart sank as I read her message. I'd been doing my best to move past the drama, to focus on planning the wedding and enjoying this exciting chapter of my life. But it seemed like Sophie wasn't ready to let things go. "What is she saying now?" I asked, bracing myself for the worst. "She's calling you materialistic for upgrading your ring," Lily replied. "She said you're trying too hard to impress people and that you're all about appearances now. I don't know why she's being like this, but it's getting kind of nasty." I stared at my phone, anger and disbelief coursing through me. Materialistic? Trying too hard? Sophie knew exactly why Ethan and I had chosen to upgrade the ring. It wasn't about showing off or proving anything to anyone. It was about us, about celebrating our love in a way that felt special. "She really said that?" I typed back, my fingers trembling. Lily replied quickly,
"Yeah.
"She's been saying it to a few people in the group. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you should know." I didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. On the one hand, I appreciated Lily's honesty. On the other hand, hearing about Sophie's continued betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut. That night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Ethan found me pacing the living room, my phone clutched in my hand. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched across his face. "Sophie's at it again," I said, my voice shaking. "She's telling people I'm materialistic, that I'm trying to impress everyone with a ring upgrade. I don't understand why she's doing this. Why can't she just let it go?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Because she's jealous," he said simply. "She's always been jealous of you. And now that you're happy, it's eating her alive." "Jealous of what?" I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "I've never tried to compete with her or make her feel less than. She's supposed to be my best friend. I don't understand why she's tearing me down like this." "Some people can't handle seeing others succeed," Ethan said, pulling me into a hug. "You don't deserve this. And honestly, I think it's time you cut her off for good." His words echoed in my mind long after he went to bed. I stayed up late that night, composing a message to Sophie. I didn't want to leave anything unsaid. The next morning, I sent her a long, heartfelt text. "Sophie, I need to be honest with you. I've heard what you've been saying about me, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine. You've insulted my engagement ring, my fiancé, and now you're accusing me of being materialistic for upgrading the ring. This isn't about the ring anymore. It's about the fact that you can't seem to be happy for me. I've always considered you my best friend, someone I could trust and rely on. But lately, it feels like you've been going out of your way to hurt me. I don't know why you're acting like this, but it's clear that you're not supportive of my happiness or my relationship. Because of that, I've decided it's best if you're not part of the wedding. I need time to reevaluate our friendship and figure out if this is even salvageable. I'm sorry it's come to this, but I can't keep letting you treat me this way." I reread the message 3 times before hitting send. My heart raced as I waited for her response. It didn't take long.
"Wow.
"You're seriously uninviting me from your wedding," she replied. "This is so dramatic. You're blowing everything out of proportion as usual. You've completely changed since you got engaged. Honestly, I don't even recognize you anymore." Her words stung, but they also solidified my decision. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how her actions had hurt me. Instead, she doubled down, turning the blame back on me. I typed out a final response. "I haven't changed, Sophie. I've just realized that I deserve better than this." Then, without giving her a chance to reply, I blocked her number. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. Cutting Sophie out of my life wasn't easy, but it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I could finally breathe again, knowing that I didn't have to deal with her negativity anymore. Still, the fallout wasn't over. Word quickly spread among our mutual friends, and I started getting messages from people asking why Sophie wasn't coming to the wedding. I told them the truth, that she had been hurtful and unsupportive, and that I needed to take a step back from our friendship. Some people understood, while others seemed uncomfortable with my decision. "You've been friends for so long," one person said. "Are you sure you can't work things out?" "I've given her plenty of chances," I replied firmly. "At some point, you have to draw a line." In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into wedding planning. Without Sophie's drama weighing me down, I felt lighter, freer. Ethan and I worked together on every detail, from the seating arrangements to the flower choices. But there were still moments when I felt a pang of sadness. Sophie had been such a big part of my life for so long, and now there was a gaping hole where our friendship used to be. I wondered if she ever thought about reaching out, if she regretted the things she'd said and done. If she did, she never showed it. One day, as I was flipping through old photos of us, I realized something. I didn't miss Sophie herself. I missed the person I thought she was, the friend who had laughed with me, cried with me, and supported me through life's ups and downs. But that person wasn't real, and letting go of her was the best thing I could have done. Planning a wedding is supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life, but the lingering aftermath of my fallout with Sophie made it bittersweet. At first, it felt strange to move forward without her. Sophie had always been such a big part of my life that I had imagined her by my side, helping me pick out flowers, dresses, and every little detail. But now, her absence felt glaring. Strange as it was also liberating. Without her constant negativity hanging over me, I found myself able to enjoy the process for the first time. Ethan and I spent entire evenings brainstorming together, from the big things like the venue and catering to the little details like what kind of candles we'd use for the centerpieces. Every choice felt like a reflection of us, and the more we planned, the more excited I became for the big day. Still, Sophie's shadow wasn't completely gone. About a week after I uninvited her, I got a message from one of our mutual friends, Clara. "Hey," she wrote. "I just wanted to check in. Sophie told me she's not invited to your wedding. Is that true?" "Yes, it's true," I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "She's really upset," Clara said. "She thought you'd cool off by now and let her back in. I don't want to pick sides, but are you sure you don't want to work things out? You've been friends for so long." I felt a pang of sadness reading Clara's words. But then I remembered all the times Sophie had hurt me, at the engagement party, in the group chat, and with her cruel gossip about my ring. She hadn't apologized for any of it. In fact, she'd doubled down, blaming me for being dramatic and accusing me of changing. "I'm sure," I typed back, my fingers steady on the keyboard. "It's not just about the wedding. I need to protect my peace, and Sophie has shown me she's not supportive of my happiness. I can't have someone like that in my life, let alone at one of the most important days of my life." Clara didn't argue further, but her message lingered with me. How could Sophie still think I'd let her back in? Did she really believe I'd just forget everything she'd done and welcome her with open arms? The weeks rolled on, and as I delved deeper into wedding planning, I started to notice something unexpected. People were opening up to me about Sophie in ways they never had before. It started with Lily, the same friend who had warned me about Sophie's gossip. We were out shopping for bridesmaid accessories when she casually mentioned, "I've always thought Sophie could be a little mean." I blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well, she's always had this way of putting people down," Lily said. "Not just you, but everyone. She masks it as humor, but it's pretty obvious. I've just never said anything because, well, she's your best friend, and I didn't want to cause drama." Her words hit me like a freight train. How had I never noticed this before? As the conversations continued, a pattern emerged. Another friend confided, "Honestly, I always wondered why you put up with Sophie's attitude. She's so quick to make everything about herself." Someone else added, "She's always been a bit jealous of you. I think your engagement just pushed her over the edge." Hearing these things was both validating and heartbreaking. On one hand, it confirmed what I'd been feeling all along, that Sophie's behavior wasn't just a one-time thing. On the other hand, it made me question myself. Had I been blind to her toxic traits all these years? Had I ignored red flags because I was so desperate to believe in the friendship we'd built? Ethan noticed the change in me as the wedding date approached. "You seem lighter," he said one evening as we finalized the guest list. "I think I am," I admitted, smiling at him. "It's strange. Losing Sophie felt like this huge loss at first, but now it feels like freedom. I'm finally realizing how much of her negativity I'd been carrying around." "She's been dragging you down for years," Ethan said, taking my hand. "I hated seeing how she made you doubt yourself. You deserve friends who lift you up, not ones who tear you down." He was right, and the more I focused on the people who truly cared about me, the less I thought about Sophie. My bridesmaids were incredible, throwing themselves into every detail of the planning process with enthusiasm and love. My family stepped up in ways I hadn't expected, offering support and encouragement every step of the way. Still, Sophie's absence didn't go unnoticed. As the RSVPs rolled in, a few people asked why she wasn't coming. Each time, I gave them the same honest answer. Sophie and I had a falling out, and I decided it was best for my peace of mind to move forward without her. Most people nodded and didn't push further, but there were a few who couldn't hide their surprise. "I always thought you two were inseparable," one guest said. "It's hard to imagine you having a wedding without her there." "It's hard for me too," I admitted. "But sometimes, you have to choose what's best for your own happiness." As the final weeks before the wedding approached, everything started falling into place. The venue was perfect, the flowers were exactly what I'd envisioned, and the dress? It was a dream come true. But more than anything, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. For so long, I'd carried the weight of Sophie's opinion on my shoulders, letting her words and actions define how I saw myself. But now, as I prepared to walk down the aisle, I realized I didn't need her approval. I was surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported me, and that was more than enough. One day, as I was addressing the final batch of invitations, I caught myself hesitating over Sophie's name. For a brief moment, I considered reaching out, giving her one last chance to make amends. But then I thought about everything that had led to this point, the engagement party, the group chat, the gossip, and I knew my decision was the right one. Some friendships aren't meant to last forever, and that's okay. Letting go of Sophie wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as I sealed the last envelope, I felt a quiet sense of closure. Because this wedding wasn't about her. It was about me, Ethan, and the life we were building together. And nothing, not even Sophie, could take that away from me. The morning of the wedding felt like stepping into a dream. I woke up to golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the cozy bridal suite where my bridesmaids and I had stayed the night before. The air was buzzing with excitement, and the reality that this was my wedding day began to sink in. My maid of honor, Lily, greeted me with a cup of coffee and a beaming smile. "Ready to get married?" she asked, her voice full of enthusiasm. "More than ready," I said, feeling a mix of nervousness and joy bubbling inside me. The hours leading up to the ceremony were a whirlwind of hair, makeup, and final touches. My dress, a flowing, lace gown with intricate floral embroidery, fit perfectly, and as I slipped it on, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, I felt beautiful. Not just because of the dress or the makeup, but because I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me. The absence of Sophie barely crossed my mind that morning. I thought it might, but as I looked around the room and saw my bridesmaids laughing, helping each other zip up dresses, and fussing over last-minute details, I felt nothing but gratitude. The ceremony was held in a garden at sunset, with soft, golden light filtering through the trees. The aisle was lined with white roses and candles, and a string quartet played as the guests took their seats. When the music changed and I stepped into view, a hush fell over the crowd. As I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I locked eyes with Ethan. He looked so handsome in his suit, his face lit up with the kind of smile that made everything else fade away. In that moment, there was no room for doubt, no space for the negativity that had once clouded my thoughts. Every step brought me closer to him, and by the time I reached the altar, my heart felt like it might burst with happiness. The ceremony was everything I'd hoped for. Ethan and I exchanged vows under a canopy of twinkling lights, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of our lives. Tears streamed down my face as I spoke, and when Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. The reception was just as magical. The garden transformed into a fairy tale scene, with long tables draped in soft linens and decorated with flickering candles and lush floral arrangements. The air was filled with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversation as our loved ones celebrated with us. Ethan and I danced our first dance to a song that had always been special to us, and as we swayed together under the stars, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. Later, as I mingled with guests, a few people brought up Sophie's absence. "So, Sophie isn't here," one friend asked cautiously, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No," I said simply, not wanting to delve into the details. "She's not," another friend chimed in, sounding surprised. "Honestly, good for you. I love Sophie, but she would have made this day about her somehow. You don't need that." Hearing that from someone else was both validating and a little sad. It made me realize that Sophie's behavior hadn't gone unnoticed all these years. I'd just been too close to see it clearly. As the night went on, the topic of Sophie came up a few more times. Most people were respectful, but a few admitted they weren't shocked by my decision to cut ties with her. I always thought she had a bit of an edge, one guest said. She could be really fun, but she had this way of making things about herself. I can't imagine her being happy to share the spotlight. Another friend leaned in during dinner and said, honestly, I think you made the right call. Tonight feels so peaceful. There's no drama, no tension. Just love. Those comments solidified my decision. I hadn't wanted to believe that Sophie's presence would have cast a shadow over such a joyful day, but hearing others confirm it made me realize just how toxic our friendship had become. The night ended with Ethan and me dancing under the stars, surrounded by the people who truly cared about us. The garden was glowing with lights, and the cool night air carried the sound of music and laughter. As I leaned into Ethan, I whispered, "This is perfect." "It is," he agreed, his arms wrapped tightly around me. "And you deserve every bit of it." As we swayed together, I felt a sense of closure. Sophie wasn't here, and that was okay. For so long, I'd thought of her as an essential part of my life, someone I couldn't imagine big moments without. But tonight had shown me that my happiness didn't depend on her. The night eventually wound down, and as Ethan and I made our way to our getaway car, our guests lined up with sparklers, cheering us on as we stepped into the next chapter of our lives. As I looked back one last time, surrounded by a sea of smiling faces, I realized that I'd made the right decision, not just in cutting Sophie out, but in choosing to prioritize my own happiness. It wasn't the absence of her negativity that made the day perfect. It was the presence of love, kindness, and genuine support from the people who mattered most. That night, as Ethan and I drove away into the darkness, my heart felt full. This was the beginning of something beautiful, and I couldn't wait to see where the journey would take us. In the days and weeks following the wedding, life felt like it was finally settling into place. Ethan and I returned from our honeymoon, a cozy week spent exploring a charming seaside town, and began building the foundation of our new life together. Everything felt lighter, freer, like the start of something beautiful. But even as I basked in this newfound peace, echoes of the past tried to creep back in. Sophie wasn't done. The first attempt came through Clara, one of our mutual friends. It was about 2 weeks after the wedding when I got a text from her out of the blue. "Hey," Clara wrote, "I was talking to Sophie, and she mentioned wanting to reach out to you. She said she regrets how things went down and hopes you're open to talking." I stared at the message for a long moment, torn between frustration and exhaustion. Sophie's regret, if it was even genuine, felt like too little, too late. She hadn't tried to apologize before the wedding or during the months of build-up to it. Instead, she'd spent that time tearing me down, making snide remarks, and turning our mutual friends into an audience for her bitterness. I finally replied, keeping my tone as neutral as I could. "I appreciate you letting me know, Clara, but I'm not ready to talk to Sophie. Honestly, I'm not sure I ever will be. I've moved on, and I need to protect my peace." Clara didn't push. "I get it," she said. "Just thought I'd pass along the message. Hope you're doing okay." I was doing okay, better than okay, actually. But that didn't mean Sophie's attempts to inch her way back into my life didn't sting. Over the next few weeks, similar messages trickled in from other mutual friends. Each time, the narrative was the same. Sophie wanted to talk things out. She wanted to clear the air. But not once did I hear that she wanted to apologize. Not once did anyone say she'd acknowledged her part in the falling out. One day, after yet another text from another friend, Ethan sat me down. "You don't owe her anything," he said firmly, taking my hand. "Not a conversation, not closure, nothing. You've given her plenty of chances, and she blew every single one of them." "I know," I said, sighing. "It's just hard. We were so close for so long. I thought she'd at least try to make things right." "She's not trying to make things right," Ethan said gently. "She's trying to pull you back into the same cycle you just broke free from." He was right. Sophie's attempts to reconnect didn't feel genuine. They felt like manipulation, a way to reel me back in without actually taking responsibility for her actions. My suspicions were confirmed when Lily, the bridesmaid who had been my rock throughout the wedding drama, told me what Sophie had really been saying behind my back. We were catching up over coffee when Lily hesitated, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," she began, "but Sophie's still making comments about you." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of comments?" Lily sighed. "She's been telling people you're overreacting, that you've changed since you got married. She keeps saying you're dramatic and that you've let all the attention go to your head." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. After everything, she still couldn't let it go. "Why would she say that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because she doesn't want to admit she was wrong, Lily said. It's easier for her to paint you as the bad guy than to own up to her behavior. Hearing those words didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. For so long, I'd clung to the belief that Sophie was my best friend, that our bond was unbreakable. But now, it was clear that the version of her I'd held onto in my mind didn't exist. That realization, painful as it was, brought me a sense of clarity. I didn't need Sophie's approval or her apologies to move forward. I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me, people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. Ethan and I threw ourselves into building our future together. We started house hunting, dreaming about the kind of home we wanted to create. We talked about our goals, our hopes, and the family we wanted to build someday. Every step we took felt like shedding another layer of the weight I'd carried for so long. Without Sophie's negativity looming over me, I found myself smiling more, laughing more, and embracing life in a way I hadn't in years. One afternoon, while sorting through old photos, I stumbled across a picture of Sophie and me from our college days. We were sitting on a park bench, laughing so hard our faces were scrunched up, holding ice cream cones that were melting faster than we could eat them. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia. That version of Sophie, the one who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who stood by my side through thick and thin, was someone I had loved deeply. But as I looked closer, I realized that version of Sophie had been gone for a long time. Losing her hurt, but it also taught me something invaluable. Friendships, like any relationship, should be reciprocal. They should bring joy and support, not pain and doubt. And while it's hard to let go of someone who once meant so much, sometimes it's the only way to make room for something better. In the weeks and months that followed, I stopped checking in with mutual friends about Sophie. I didn't ask what she was saying or doing, and I stopped worrying about whether she'd ever apologize. Instead, I focused on the people who showed up for me every day, the friends who celebrated my victories, comforted me in my struggles, and supported my relationship with Ethan without question. I'd spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace with Sophie, trying to overlook the little jabs and the subtle slights. But now, for the first time, I realized how much lighter life could be without that burden. Sophie had taught me an important lesson, though not in the way she intended. She showed me the value of choosing my own happiness, of setting boundaries and standing firm in them. And for that, I was grateful. As Ethan and I sat together on our couch one quiet evening, planning our next adventure, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it was full of love. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I needed anything or anyone to complete it. Months had passed since the wedding, and life had finally found its rhythm. Ethan and I were settled into a cozy little rental while we searched for our dream home. Between work, friends, and lazy evenings spent binging shows together, Sophie was no longer a lingering thought in my mind. That's why, when a mutual friend casually mentioned her name over lunch one day, I was caught off guard. "Did you hear about Sophie?" Clara asked, stirring her iced coffee as she leaned forward. I shook my head, a pang of unease creeping into my chest. "No, I haven't. What's going on?" "She and her boyfriend broke up," Clara said, her voice low, as though sharing a secret. I blinked, trying to process the news. Sophie had been with her boyfriend, Ryan, for as long as I could remember, 5 years, maybe 6. While we weren't close anymore, I'd always assumed they were happy together. "Wow," I said slowly. "I didn't see that coming. Do you know what happened?" Clara hesitated for a moment, then sighed. Apparently, she was pushing him to propose, and he wasn't ready. It turned into this huge fight, and they decided to call it quits. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. Shock, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite place. "That's really sad," I said, though the words felt hollow. Clara nodded. "Yeah, but honestly, it kind of explains a lot." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," Clara said carefully, "you know how Sophie acted around your engagement, how she made all those comments about your ring and everything. I think it was less about you and more about her own insecurities. She was jealous." The word hit me like a freight train. Jealous? Sophie? The Sophie I'd always admired for her confidence and boldness. The Sophie who had never seemed to want for anything? The idea felt foreign. "What makes you think that?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "She told me once," Clara admitted, glancing away. "We were out for drinks not long after your engagement party, and she got a little tipsy. She said it was hard for her to see you so happy because Ryan hadn't proposed yet. She didn't say it outright, but you could tell it was eating at her. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what Clara was telling me. All those snide comments, the mocking jokes, the whispers behind my back, were they all rooted in jealousy? The more I thought about it, the more everything started to click. Sophie's reaction to my engagement ring, her relentless criticism of the upgrade, even her refusal to apologize, it all stemmed from her own unhappiness. For years, I'd looked at Sophie as someone who had it all together. She was confident, funny, and always seemed to be in control. But now I saw a different side of her. She wasn't tearing me down because she truly believed I deserved it. She was lashing out because my happiness was a painful reminder of what she felt she was missing. It didn't excuse her behavior, not by a long shot, but it explained it. That evening, I told Ethan about what I'd learned. "So, she was jealous of you the whole time?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Apparently," I said, shrugging. "She was upset that Ryan hadn't proposed yet, and I guess seeing me happy with you made her feel worse." Ethan shook his head, his expression unreadable. "I get it, but it still doesn't justify what she did. She had a choice. She could have been happy for you." "I know," I said, though a part of me felt a pang of sympathy for Sophie. Ethan reached for my hand, his tone softening. "How do you feel about it? Does knowing this change anything?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. "It doesn't change what happened. She hurt me, and I can't forget that. But it makes me understand her a little more. I guess I feel sorry for her." "Sorry for hers?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not in a pitying way," I clarified. "Just, I can't imagine what it must have been like for her, feeling that way and not knowing how to deal with it. I wish she'd handled it differently, but I also don't want to carry around anger toward her anymore. It's exhausting." Ethan nodded, his thumb brushing over my hand. "You're a better person than she deserved, you know that?" Over the next few days, I found myself reflecting on my friendship with Sophie in a way I hadn't before. It was bittersweet to think about all the good times we'd shared, knowing that jealousy had been brewing beneath the surface for who knows how long. But as much as it hurt, I realized I didn't want to hold on to the resentment anymore. Sophie had made her choices, and I'd made mine. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over anger. So I forgave her. Not in the sense of reaching out or rekindling our friendship, but in my own heart. I let go of the hurt she'd caused me, not for her sake, but for mine. One day, while cleaning out an old box of mementos, I stumbled across a photo of Sophie and me from years ago. We were at a music festival, laughing and holding hands as we navigated the crowded field. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. That version of Sophie, the carefree, supportive friend I'd loved, was someone I would always treasure. But she wasn't the person who had mocked me at my engagement party or spread rumors about me behind my back. "I hope she finds her happiness," I murmured to myself as I tucked the photo back into the box. Because at the end of the day, that's what it all boiled down to. Sophie's unhappiness had driven her to act the way she did, and while it didn't justify her actions, it made me realize how important it was to prioritize my own happiness. From that point on, I stopped asking mutual friends about Sophie or worrying about what she might be saying. I had my life, my marriage, and a future filled with love and possibility. And that was more than enough. Forgiveness wasn't about Sophie, it was about me. By letting go of the anger and resentment, I freed myself to move forward without looking back. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give myself. Today, as I sit in the quiet of my new home, sunlight pouring through the windows and the faint sound of Ethan tinkering in the kitchen, I can't help but marvel at how far I've come. Life isn't perfect, it never is, but it feels right. It feels peaceful. And more importantly, it feels like mine. When I look back on the whirlwind of emotions that surrounded my fallout with Sophie, it's hard to believe how much space it once occupied in my life. There was a time when her words, her actions, and her absence felt like an open wound. I couldn't imagine moving forward without her, and the idea of losing our friendship felt like losing a part of myself. But here I am, months later, not just surviving but thriving. Ethan and I are happily married now, and every day I'm reminded of how lucky I am to have him. He's not just my partner. He's my anchor, my safe harbor. Together, we've started building the life we always dreamed of, one filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. It's a life I once worried would be overshadowed by Sophie's negativity, but now it shines brighter than ever. One of the biggest lessons I've learned from all of this is the importance of surrounding myself with the right people. The kind of friends who lift you up, who celebrate your victories, and who stand by you even when life gets messy. Losing Sophie forced me to reevaluate my relationships, and in doing so, I realized just how blessed I am to have the friends I do. There's Lily, my maid of honor and constant cheerleader, who stepped up in ways I never expected during the wedding planning process. She's the kind of friend who sends you random texts just to remind you how loved you are, and her positivity is contagious. Then there's Clara, who didn't shy away from the difficult conversations and had the courage to tell me the truth about Sophie's behavior, even when it wasn't easy. And of course, my family, who never wavered in their support and reminded me what unconditional love looks like. These are the people who matter. These are the relationships I want to nurture and protect. As for Sophie, I wish her well, but from a distance. There was a time when I hoped she would apologize, when I thought maybe we could patch things up and find our way back to the friendship we once had. But I've come to realize that some wounds aren't meant to heal. Our friendship had cracks in it long before my engagement, and Sophie's actions only brought them to the surface. I don't hate her. In fact, I've let go of most of the anger I once felt. Holding on to resentment only weighs you down, and I refuse to let the past have that kind of power over me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean reopening the door for someone who's shown you they don't deserve to be in your life. Sophie made her choices, and I've made mine. And while I'll always cherish the good times we had, I know now that our friendship wasn't what I thought it was. Sometimes, people we think are our friends turn out to be anything but. It's a painful realization, but it's also a necessary one. Losing Sophie was hard. It felt like tearing off a Band-Aid that had been holding together old wounds. But once the initial sting faded, I saw the truth. Letting go of her wasn't just about removing negativity from my life. It was about making space for positivity, for growth, and for the kind of relationships that truly enrich my life. The experience taught me to set boundaries, to stand up for myself, and to prioritize my own happiness. It taught me that it's okay to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you, even if it hurts. And it taught me that real friendship isn't about proximity or history. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. As I move forward, I carry these lessons with me. They've shaped me, strengthened me, and reminded me of the kind of person I want to be. I want to be someone who loves fiercely, forgives freely, and chooses joy every single day. The road ahead is full of possibilities, and I'm excited to see where it leads. Whether it's buying our first home, starting a family, or simply growing old with Ethan by my side, I know I have so much to look forward to. And while Sophie is no longer a part of my life, I'll always be grateful for the role she played in this chapter. She taught me what I don't want in a friendship, and in doing so, she helped me recognize the relationships that truly matter. So here I am, sitting in my little corner of the world, surrounded by love and laughter and all the things that make life beautiful. I'm not bitter, I'm not angry, and I'm not looking back. Because moving forward isn't just about leaving the past behind. It's about stepping into the future with an open heart and the confidence to embrace whatever comes next. And that's exactly what I plan to do.